All right, so welcome everybody to the animated lines tutorial. We are going to make some lines move in our tutorial today. So if you haven't done this already, go ahead and download the tutorial file that I have for today. It's just an Illustrator file. It's a silhouette of an owl. This is all you're gonna need for today's tutorial. And go ahead and launch After Effects if you haven't done so already. So we're gonna come in to After Effects. We're gonna go ahead and start a new composition. We're gonna have this be a video composition. So the 19 by 1080 aspect ratio, or the 16:9. And we're gonna do 24 frames. And for this first composition, we're just gonna do, let's do 8 seconds. Make sure you do have that 0 in before the 8 so that it's 08:00, okay? So we're going to go ahead and create that. The first thing that we need to do is create a solid layer, and this time I'm going to have you choose black. So if you go to the color picker, you're just gonna go all the way down to that bottom left side, hit OK, and we're gonna have a nice solid black layer for today. We're gonna work with an owl silhouette, so we want it to be really high contrast as possible. All right, so you're gonna come over to the project panel here, and we're gonna go ahead and import that owl file. So let's go to import file. Here's the owl. Go ahead and bring that in. Now this is really important. When you get this dialog box, it's gonna say import kind, and you want to make sure that it says composition, not footage. So make sure that you have composition selected here. If you don't, it's not gonna work for you correctly. So go ahead and hit OK. And what you're going to see here is that we've got a new composition called Owl. And I just realized my mouse cursor is small. So let me go ahead and just make that a little bit larger so you can see where I'm pointing to on the screen. Okay, so if we double click the owl composition, you're going to see the Illustrator file opens up. And here we have a layer in the Illustrator file that exists within that Illustrator project. The other thing we have is something called owl layers. So in your Illustrator file, whatever layers you have organized in that particular file, you're gonna see those pop up in After Effects like so. So if you have 3 layers with 3 different objects on them, you would see 3 layers here. But we're just starting simple with the owl silhouette, so this is all you're gonna see. Now we're actually not gonna use the owl composition at all. We are going to bring the owl silhouette into the composition that we are working on right here. So what I want you to do is toggle down on the owl layers folder, click on the Illustrator layer here, and just click on it and drag it on down. And you're not gonna see anything at first because the owl is also a black object. But so what we could do is we could turn off the black solid for just a moment. Let's go ahead and hit the S key and bring the scale down, and you're gonna see the silhouette of the owl up here. Okay. We're actually going to do something with this owl. We're going to convert it to a shape layer in After Effects so that it acts like a shape within this particular composition. So we're going to leave the solid layer off for just a few moments. Go ahead and click on the Kappa 1 owl layer. We're going to go to Layer, Create, Shapes from Vector Layer. This is a very cool trick to know about when you want to bring things in from Illustrator that you've drawn and turn them into actual shapes in After Effects so that you can animate certain things with them. So we're going to go ahead and create shapes from vector layer. What you're going to see over here is that it shuts off the Illustrator layer that we brought in. It's created a new shape layer, and we know that it's a shape layer from the little shape right here. And we see here that up in our properties, there's a fill of black and then a stroke of question mark because there isn't a stroke on it yet, which we will add in just a moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to animate a line that makes it look like this owl silhouette is being drawn over time. And this is going to be kind of working towards an animated logo of sorts. So this is kind of a animation technique you might use on an animated logo. You can, of course, use it in other ways, but what we're covering in these tutorials, of course, is a toolbox of different skills that you can use to put different combinations of techniques together to create different types of motion design projects. So this owl is black right now. We do need to give the owl a stroke here in After Effects. I'm going to go ahead and toggle up the Illustrator file. The visibility shut off here. We don't really need it anymore, but I'm just going to leave it there for now. So go ahead and make sure that you have the owl layer selected. You're going to go over here to your fill and your stroke. And to the right of both of those, you have this add and the little button next to it. So go ahead and click that little button with the forward arrow. You're going to add a stroke. And so you're going to see it's probably going to default to white. We've got a white stroke for the owl. So if we turn the visibility on of the bottom layer and click off, you see this very light dusting outline. We'll make that a little thicker. Let's go ahead and go up to the stroke and make that a little thicker. So we're going to drag that maybe up to about 30. When I click off the owl, you're going to see the owl silhouette up here before us. The other thing we want to do is I'm going to go ahead and shut the fill off because the fill isn't doing anything for us. So you might be tempted to click on this box to shut the fill off, but this is where you choose the color. What you're actually going to do is click on fill in blue letters here, and you're going to choose this box with a red slash mark, and that's going to take away the fill. All right, so we have our owl ready to go, and what I'm going to do is show you how to animate it so that the silhouette of the owl fills in over a period of a few seconds. Okay, so we're going to go down to our layers panel. We've got a lot of different properties on this particular object. We have a path group and a fill group here, but what we also have is, whoops, just toggle that up. We have the stroke. This is the stroke that we added. This is the white. You can see we can control the width of the stroke down here. I might make it just a little bit thinner, maybe more like 25. Okay, so all of our properties that we want to change about the stroke are going to happen down here in this particular area. So what we want to do is we're going to add an animation capability to the stroke so that we can animate it over time. So what we're going to do is choose stroke 1. There's a little add button here, just like we did up at the top when we added the stroke. We're going to click on this, and I want you to choose the option Trim Paths. Okay? All right. So you're going to see Trim Paths adds at the top here. And if you take the start, the line of start, and you slide it back and forth, you're going to see that that white stroke animates over time. So it gives the appearance of it being kind of drawn on to the surface of the composition window. So let me just do that again a little bit closer up so you can see that. You can also slide the end and have the same effect, but it just goes the other direction. So it really kind of just depends on how you want it to be drawn on to the composition. So with your scrubbing tool at the beginning of the timeline, I'm going to click start. I'm going to toggle on the keyframe clock for start. I'm going to come down to maybe the 3rd second, and I'm going to slide it all the way to 100%. And now let's look and see how that animation is looking. And actually, I'm just realizing I did this backwards. I want it to start with nothing and then add everything. So I could have just reversed the keyframes, but I did this backwards. So and that's easy to do, right? So let's slide the slider so that there is no owl. So we're gonna slide it to 100% for start. And then I'm gonna come forward about 3 seconds. And then I'm gonna toggle it to 0. And then the owl will appear. Whoops. Okay, so now it's all the way to 0. So now the owl will appear over time. So I'm gonna click off into the gray area so it's not selected anymore, and I can see how the owl writes out the silhouette over time. That's it. Very cool. So you can kind of play around with the timing if you want it to go a little faster, a little slower. I think it's fine where it's at. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab this layer and I'm gonna move it over a little bit. And I'm actually gonna bring the scale down because if I turn my title safe on, I'm out of the safe action zone for this composition. So I'm gonna click on this layer, hit my S key for scale. I'm gonna bring it down a little bit more. And I'm gonna bring it a little bit over like so. Okay. So I'm also going to add an effect to this layer because we have a very high contrast situation. And I want the owl silhouette to kind of look like a little bit of a neon light, something like that in the darkness. So I am going to have you search for an effect called glow. So we're going to take glow and I'll just drag it and drop it this time. I'll take glow and drop it on, and you can kind of see, if we zoom in, you can kind of see that there's a glow happening around, which is just kind of like it's a feathering of the layer, and that gives it a really nice effect. And I'm gonna actually go down and lock my solid layer underneath because I keep accidentally grabbing it and moving it, and I don't want that to happen anymore. Okay, so now we have our owl animated. Let's do some things with text and turning that into shape layers. So I want you to go to your text tool, go ahead and add a text layer. And we're just gonna say, for the sake of this tutorial, that this logo is, let's say the company's named Owl, I suppose. So we're gonna go Owl. And I'm going to change this font to something that stands a little taller, but is still very bold. So let me see. Phosphate, yeah, that's a really wide, thick font. So let's go with something a little less wide. What about Iron Strike? Well, that could work. Need to make it a little smaller so it's fitting on there okay. Okay, so now we have a little bit of a, let's say a company name and a logo shape. So I'm gonna move Owl to right about here. I am going to change the fill to nothing, actually. Well, first, before it can even have a fill and a stroke, in terms of shapes, we need to convert this into shape layers. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. Actually, let's see. I'll go ahead and change the stroke now. So I'm going to change the stroke to white. Well, I want to transform them in different ways. Okay, sorry. I'm just going to hit OK. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this text layer and we're going to convert it to shape layers like we did with the Illustrator asset that we brought in. So I'm going to go to Layer, Create, and then we're going to create shapes from the text this time. So last time we created shapes from a vector layer that we brought in. This time we're doing it from the text itself. So what you're going to see is that the text layer of OWL, the visibility is shut off. A new layer has been created. And we have 3 letters here. So these are now shape layers. So you see how the outside of the O it has anchor points and paths like it's just a regular shape now. And it probably has an inner O and an outer O. Let's see here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to do different things with the O and the W and the L. So the O, I'm going to say that I don't want to fill it all. So we're going to click fill the word in blue and say no fill. And then it looks like if I toggle off visibility, yes, it did in fact make 2 shapes. There's the inner O and the outer O. So I'm going to click on the outer one and I'm going to bring up the stroke. I can just click on this and hit 25. Oh, that's quite a bit bigger than it is on the OWL itself. Let's go with something that matches a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so clicking on the first O here, I'm going to toggle that down and I'm going to choose the path and we're going to add trim paths to this as well. So if we toggle down trim paths, you're going to see that it actually treats this entire O as one path even though it's broken. And we're going to go ahead and animate that O in while the OWL is also being drawn in. So you want to bring your scrubbing tool to the beginning of the timeline. We're going to toggle. Well, actually, we're going to slide this so that there is no O because we want it to write onto the screen. Go ahead and toggle on animation and have a keyframe. Starting at the beginning with nothing, we'll scrub down to about 3 seconds where the OWL is completely drawn in. And then we're going to slide it down to 0. Now we have the OWL and the O appearing together. So that's pretty cool. That's 2 different ways that you can kind of have that ride-on effect. There are other ways to do it, but we're just sticking with the most simple ways today as we are, of course, building a foundation in these skills. Okay, so for the W and L, I kind of imagine that the O is kind of the main letter of this particular, let's say animated logo that we're doing. And so for the W and L, I just want those to appear slowly over time into a bit of a lighter gray. The other thing that I would like to do is put a glow on the O layer here. So I'm going to go ahead and select the O and I want it to glow, of course, like the OWL layer is. So I'm just going to take glow here and drag and drop it on the O. Let's see, I don't know. Maybe it won't let me individually do that. It's possible, I guess. Well, that's okay. The glow can be applied to all the text. So we're gonna just drag and drop glow. I'm gonna leave it at its default. So, but you can come and, you know, play around with these settings if you like. And it actually does just pop the W and L into a white color, which is fine. So I'm gonna back up the timeline here. So what I want to happen is for the owl and the O to draw in over time. And then at about 3 seconds, I'm just gonna change the opacity of the W and the L to come in, but I don't want them to come in at 100% opacity because visually the W and the L are overpowering these two silhouettes. And I want these to be a little bit more low key because what I'm doing, if I leave the composition like this, in the end, the viewer is going to be looking at the W and the L and not paying attention to the owl and the O anymore. So we are going to bring these in, but not at a full opacity. So under the owl outlines, under contents, we're going to toggle up that O. We're going to click on the W. And you're going to see, so we always have transform of the entire layer, but you're actually going to also see transform W, which is the transform properties for just the W itself. And so what we're going to do is bring the opacity of that down to 0 at about 3 seconds. Make sure your scrubbing tool's at about 3 seconds. We're going to toggle on animation there. And then over the next 2 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and slide that opacity up to about 30%. So it's still there and it's reading, but it's not overpowering the owl silhouette and the O so much. And then I'm going to take my scrubbing tool back, maybe between these two keyframes, and I'm going to bring the L in. So I'm going to toggle up the W, toggle down the L, transform L, we're toggling down. We want to slide down to an opacity of 0, toggle on that animation, drag our scrubbing tool forward about 2 seconds, and we're going to bring that in maybe at an even lower opacity. And actually, it might be kind of nice to do an effect where it flickers in and out. So let's go ahead and bring it up to an opacity of maybe 15. Scrub down just a few frames. Back to 0. And we'll go ahead and zoom in on this timeline here. That's that. You can zoom in with this little mountain slider down at the bottom. So let's go ahead a couple frames. We'll maybe bring it back in at 8%. Go a little bit forward, down to 0. And then our final opacity could be like 15% again. So let's see how that's looking over time. Perfect. All right. So we're going to toggle that up. I'm going to zoom out of the whole timeline here and go to the beginning, and let's take a look and see how this is looking over time. There's the flicker. Okay, cool. So here's hopefully this gives you some ideas of what you might be able to do having a logo appear to the viewer over time, and a really cool technique with animating lines onto the screen. All right, well, if you haven't already, I should have saved my project already and I didn't. So if you haven't saved your project, you want to go ahead and save as. I'm going to call this lines, and I will just put that on my desktop for now. And then, of course, you want to go ahead, and we just saved it, but, save your progress. I don't always remember to remind you to save your projects or save while you're going through with the tutorial to save your progress, but always keep that in mind. That's something that you want to get into the habit of doing all the time. It will save you a lot of pain in the future. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.